Hello everyone, Ember Power here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at Zoroark box. So Zoroark, in case you didn't know somehow, or you're new to the TCG and joined in the Scarlet Violet era, Zoroark has the amazing ability Phantom Transformation, which allows it to turn itself into any Stage 1 Pokemon in your discard pile. Which basically means that the deck can be very versatile, it can have many different attacking options, and honestly that's like the most appealing thing about Zoroark box, I feel like, for a lot of people. But unfortunately, the deck does suffer from some consistency issues, so to speak. And of course, Lost Zone is a bit of a menace right now. And so you do kind of take the loss to Lost Zone. And if you're like me, who faces a lot of that deck on the ladder every single day, then I could see why playing something like this would be pretty off putting. But fortunately, if you can dodge those decks and you're just playing a League Challenge, for example, or a League Cup, then you might face less Lost Zone, and the deck is still a blast to play. So what other, or should say, what attackers do we have? Well, we do have the form of Slowbro. While this Slowbro has the attack Twilight Inspiration that says you can only use this attack if your opponent has exactly one prize card remaining. If you do, take 2 prize cards. So this essentially means that we have a way to win the game against single prize decks if they go ahead in the prize race. So for example, against something like Rapid Strike Malamar or Regigigas, for example, if they end up taking the first prize, then we can essentially let them get down to 1 prize card remaining, and then we can take the final 2 prize cards. This can also be used in some decks that they can't really screw the prize race, and therefore, you can just try and take 2 sets of KOs basically against V-Star Pokemon, let your opponent go down to 1 prize card, set up a Slowbro prey, and take 1 more prize. But of course, that play is a little bit dodgy. Unfortunately, this won't work against Lost Zone either because Sableye can just snipe Pokemon, but it's still a very fun card, and it will win you a lot of games. Next up, we have a Hisuian Arcanine, which has the attack Very Vulnerable. For single energy, or no energy at all actually, for 0 energy, does 10 damage, and if you have 0 cards in your hand, this attack does 150 more damage. So definitely messed up that translation a bit. But Very Vulnerable, 160 damage if you have 0 cards in hand, means that you can actually one-hit KO stuff that's fighting weak. So, like Regieleki VMAX or Miraidon. And that's basically why Hisuian Arcanine is still in the deck, and also because I just like the character rare art, to be honest. There's probably some better fighting type attackers. I've seen some people use a different fighting type Arcanine now, but personally I like this one a little bit more just because I think thinning your hand down to 0 cards is still pretty easy to do. Plus, it's also just an amazing artwork, and I can't help myself from using it. Next up is we have a card that kind of dips in and out of Zoroark box. Now, when this deck first kind of became a thing, back when the set first came out in Evolving Skies, or the card first came out, I should say, in Evolving Skies, when we had stuff like Galarian Weezing still around, Flapple was like a big deal because of the Iono engine, how popular it was. But for some reason, more and more Zoroark decks choose to neglect Flapple, which I think is really strange because this card is amazing against stuff like Chien-Pao and Mew VMAX, I should say. So this deck does have some issues regarding some of the top decks, but for decks like Lugia, if they overbench with abilities for some reason, then Flapple is really strong with Acidic Mucus, and it will net you some when it kills. It's a pretty cool card. We also have Mightyena, which has the ability Hustle Bark, that says if any of your Pokemon or your opponent's Pokemon has a VMAX, basically, you can attack for free. So this is another anti-Mew counter, essentially, and allows you to want to kill Mew VMAX. Will this auto-win that matchup? Not necessarily, because we only play 1 copy, and if they play a Lost City, then they can remove Mightyena from play. But to be honest, if you've just taken 3 prize cards with a single prizer, and the Fusion Strike Mew on top of that isn't as popular as it used to be, then you can kind of see why this ends up being a pretty positive matchup for us. And we can also reach massive damage against Mew thanks to cards like Flapple. So yeah, pretty straightforward in that regard. We also have, I'll talk about Cetitan last because that's like the latest edition from Paldea Evolved. But I just want to talk quickly about Oinkologne EX, which has the attack Maddening Scent and Heavy Stomp. Should probably also mention the fact that Oinkologne is the only EX card in this deck and is essentially a 2 prizer for that reason. But basically, why Oinkologne is in here is I feel like this deck kind of lacks just a big, bulky Pokemon sometimes. There's a lot of turns where I just want to have one more turn to set up, or just not feel like I need to be constantly rushing to try and find the next Zora or Zoroark. I'm sure if you've played this deck before, you've experienced something similar. And Oinkologne really helps with that. It just provides you with a bit more of a tank, and against stuff like Miraidon that can't necessarily want to kill Oinkologne without using modifiers, can be pretty good, and it can buy you some more time. Also, the attacks are pretty solid as well. Maddening Scent doing 10 damage and then 30 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Also, having an attack like this meant that I could cut Kleavor because Arcanine kind of fulfills the role of fighting weakness, and Kleavor was there for big bench decks, and Oinkologne kind of fills that niche with Maddening Scent. Also has the attack Heavy Stomp, which is pretty decent in all honesty. Doing 210 is alright, but because we only play several copies of one type of energy, like we play multiple Double Turbo and the Reverse Energy, so we don't play many single energy, so Heavy Stomp, a bit more expensive to use, but if we can pull it off, it is solid damage as well. But talking about the latest edition, which is honestly why this video got made in the first place, and that is going to be Cetitan. So Cetitan, 108 HP with the attack Special Horn, does 80 damage, and if this Pokemon has any special energy attached, it does 140 more. And honestly, what I've felt Zoroark boxes really lacked, as well as like not having really bulky Pokemon, like stage 1s typically have been very fragile in the past, like Flapple only has 90 HP for example. One thing I've really thought Zoroark boxes lacked is honestly just a Pokemon to do massive damage. Now I thought that Breaksin from Silver Tempest would honestly fulfill that role quite nicely, because it did 60 damage for every Serena in your discard pile. But ultimately, I moved away from Breaksin in this deck. I know it sucks because the character rare is so amazing, but unfortunately I had to move away from Breaksin because it was just too slow to get there with the damage. So Titan just does basically the same amount of damage Breaksin does, but the only requirement is you need to be behind on prizes in order to activate the special energy, because we pay for the effect of Special Horn by using a reverse energy. So before we go into trainers and energy, I'll just quickly like to take a look at some of the other Pokemon. I am playing one copy of Skwovet. This was mainly here for when I was messing around with an Altaria variant of this deck and running like Radiant Venusaur and stuff. I wasn't having as much success with that deck as I wanted to, so I switched back to Bibarel, and I've honestly been enjoying Bibarel a lot more. I just think it sets up nicely, and it sets up more easily, I should say, and you get to draw more cards throughout the game, and personally I prefer that. But, you know, if you prefer Altaria to guarantee supporters every turn, I could honestly see the argument for moving back to Altaria. But Skwovet still in here just means that we can reset our hand and then draw back up with Bibarel. We also play one Manaphy because we kind of have to. Now, this was originally supposed to be like, I kind of say this every video where I run Manaphy, but basically this was supposed to be for like Radiant Greninja in Lost Zone, but Lost Zone isn't really a matchup that this deck can win at all. Even with Oinkologne, honestly, Oinkologne does actually give you a solid shot against Lost Zone just because of how bulky it is in the early game, how annoying that is for them to KO if they're not running Dragonite. But honestly, Manaphy kind of there to deal with Radiant Greninja, and also just to deal with Radiant Greninja and Chien-Pao so they can't like cheat the prize race, because Chien-Pao is honestly a pretty good matchup for Zoroark, just as long as they can't cheat prizes with Radiant Greninja. So there might be times where they boss KO Manaphy with Radiant Greninja, then, you know, they might try and Super Rod their Greninja after you KO it, presumably the next turn, so it can get a bit annoying, but Manaphy is mainly there for that reason. Also there for Urshifu, because for some flippin' reason, Urshifu is still like one of the most popular decks on the ladder. I have no idea why. I don't think it's a particularly great deck, but Urshifu seems to be really popular with people, so yeah. Urshifu, yeah, very popular deck for some reason. But as before mentioned, we do run the Bibarel. We've got 2 Bidoof, 2 Bibarel. You could run more or less to your fancy, but I think 2-2 is just pretty self-explanatory. Sets up easily enough. We've got a Bidoof. 60 HP because, well, it's the artwork, and as well as the ability, Carefree Countenance. Will protect it from Radiant Greninja, which is nice, but, you know, 60 HP is a bit of a step down from 70 HP Bidoof, but honestly, I couldn't help myself because of the artwork, and the ability I think is pretty good, so you can make that decision whether or not you want to play. Just bring up the other Bidoof here. Yeah, so we've got the... Oh wait, do I not own a 70 HP Bidoof? Okay, apparently I don't own a 70 HP Bidoof, but there is a 70 HP Bidoof, I believe, in Standard. But yeah, moving on a bit, we do have 2 copies of Bibarel with Industrious Incisors, drawn to F5. Pretty self-explanatory ability, pretty great for letting you draw more cards. As for the trainers, I honestly feel like this deck could do with some more trainers in it, but finding the space in this deck because you have to run so many Pokemon is a little bit annoying, to be honest. But yeah, we have 4 Ultra Ball because it just helps with discarding other Pokemon, the stage 1s primarily, into the discard pile. We also run 4 Level Ball because we play so many small HP Pokemon. 1 Hisuian Heavy Ball because prizing a Zorua in this deck is just an absolute no-no. 4 Battle VIP Pass because, honestly, the games where you get Battle VIP Pass in the start are very, very good. And it's honestly... It's kind of got me wondering if maybe a Mew engine with like trekking shoes and Pokestop could be worth looking into, because this deck kind of needs Battle VIP Pass to get set up properly. Because if you just have one or two basics in the early game, your opponent is very quickly going to like just trample over you. So having VIP Pass is kind of a must-have. And then the other big ball Pokemon search, I guess, Pokemon search, is Capturing Aroma, which could find either an evolution or a basic. Typically, we want this to find an evolution Pokemon because it's more convenient, but this can double up as a nest ball, so it's also just to replace Evolution Incense, which was such a big part of why this deck was good in the first place. So yeah, Capturing Aroma, definitely a downgrade from Incense, but still not a bad card at all. We also have one Escape Rope for a switch out, which also kind of doubles as a Gust effect, and then one single copy of Switch. As for supporters, I'm still kind of messing around with what supporters I want to include. I used to run a high count of Serena because it obviously synergized quite well with Breaks In. Also, the discarding effect is also really strong, as well as having synergy with Gust to potentially bring up a V Pokemon. So honestly, I could see the deck going back to heavy counts of Serena, but at the same time, it doesn't really draw that many cards, so I can also see why it would be a problem. But still, if you're going down the Bibarel route, I wouldn't be surprised to run high counts of Serena, because you want to be discarding cards with Serena to then draw back up with Bibarel anyway. So yeah, seems pretty decent, honestly. One copy of Boss's Orders because I couldn't find room for 4. To be honest, I can't find room for 4 of everything. But yeah, I might go back to higher counts of Boss, but honestly, Gusting isn't like your top priority in this deck for some reason. So I probably could end up honestly cutting the Boss, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. Well, 3 Cynthia's Ambition, because even though I don't hate this card, I'm not like the biggest fan of it either. I think it's still a little bit dodgy, and Serena technically has much better versatility against Cynthia, especially when Cynthia is activating with nothing being knocked out, basically. So kind of a bit sketch on that front. Maybe Bruno could be better, to be honest, but Shuffle Draw 4 just seems so bad when it's not a Judge. So yeah, moved away from Bruno to go back to Cynthia, but I could see myself honestly going back. And then I'm also playing like a weird split. I've got like 2 Iono going on here for some late game disruption, which is always nice, and 2 Professor's Research, discard your hand, draw 7. I've seen some people say that they don't like Research because, it's kind of like you're discarding all the resources you potentially need. And I've just noticed this deck isn't running any Super Rod. I'm not sure how I've been managing without that. But yeah, you probably want to add a Super Rod actually. But yeah, apart from that, Research is kind of important just to get set up properly. But either way, discarding powerful resources that you might need, such as Reversal Energy, could be a bit detrimental. So high counts of Judge or Iono, again, I could see happening with this deck, but I still want to experiment with high counts of Research, just for that early game burst potential. Next up, though, we have a single copy of Judge, or How the Mighty Have Fallen, because originally when I was first building this deck, it was more of like an Oinkologne toolbox deck, and I had like 3 copies of Oinkologne, 4 copies of Judge in testing, but I wasn't the biggest fan of that deck. It just kind of felt like a worse version of Oinkologne with Bibarel and Skwovet. So I moved away from that, and that's why there's only 1 Judge left. I'll probably cut Judge eventually in favor of something like a Super Rod, and then I'll probably cut the 2 Research in favor of like a 3rd Iono, and then maybe even a 2nd Hisuian Heavy Ball or something. But, I'll let you know if I make any major changes to this deck, and if I ever do gameplay, of course, I'll probably change it up for that. So yeah, supporters counts very skewed in this deck, but I'm still working on it, so have to see how that goes. We also have 2 Gift Energy, which is like the single energy attachments for stuff like Flapple and Oinkologne. Pretty decent effect as well, definitely some good draw power. We also have 4 Double Turbo, which is a bit of a pain because it minuses our damage, but still can pay for energy attack costs. And of course, 4 new of the Reverse Energy, which is mainly here for Cetitan, to be honest, which is like your big hitter in the deck anyway. And the cards have gone missing. Oh, they're back. But you could also, to be honest, you could use other stuff, like there is Hisuian Arcanine with Sharp Fang that can only do 100 damage, but if you just need to do 100 damage that turn, it's alright. There's also Flapple that can do Fighting Tackle for 160, which can still 2-hit KO stuff like Lugia V-Star, potentially, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but still seems fairly inefficient, but, still an option and there to consider. Then, of course, Mightyena, you could copy Wild Tackle if you really wanted to, but still not the best option. I guess Bibarel has Tail Smash, but that's just, I think you just concede if you have to attack Bibarel at that point. But yeah, that's kind of it for Zoroark Box. Been a bit of a longer video than usual, I think. But yeah, let me know what you think down below. Do you think this deck is finally good? It's been Ember Power? And yeah, thank you for watching.